Okay, so let's jump right in with a scenario that might sound familiar. Imagine you're in a company meeting and the executive's talking about, different employees and their performance, and they bring up this guy, Harry. Now, Harry is making like 5 times more than the average person on the team. You'd think, okay, maybe he's super brilliant or works crazy hours, right?
Right.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
According to the company's own tests, Harry's not any smarter than anyone else. He doesn't work longer hours, actually. He takes more vacation time. And he doesn't have any special advantages, like better clients or a fancier degree.
So what's going on here? What's the secret ingredient to Harry's success?
Well, what's really interesting and what your sources really dive into is this idea of thinking big. And it's not about some kind of magical trick or shortcut, right?
Right, right.
It's about developing a particular mindset. And that's what this deep dive is all about. We're going to unpack what thinking big actually means, why it's not something that comes naturally to everyone, and most importantly for you, how you can cultivate this mindset in your own life. Exactly. And what's so cool about the sources you've brought is that they really break it down into practical steps. They focus on this foundational idea of believing in yourself and your ability to succeed. And then they go into like how you can manage your thoughts, how to overcome those limiting beliefs that we all have, those things that hold us back. So whether you're trying to get ahead in your career or finally tackle that big project you've been putting off or just feel like you're capable of more, this deep dive is for you.
Yeah, and when you look at everything in your sources, the central message that really comes through is this. Belief in your own success isn't just some feel-good idea. It's actually the fundamental engine that makes that success possible.
I love that analogy. Like, belief is the fuel.
It's the fuel, yeah.
It gets it going.
It gets you going.
And it makes me think of like young people just entering the workforce, right? I mean, tons of them hope to be successful someday. Maybe they even wish for it. But what your sources point out is this crucial difference. There's this smaller group that truly believes they will succeed. And it's not just a passive belief, it translates into action. You see them actively studying successful people, figuring out how they did it. They have that can-do attitude.
And that's a really important point for you listening.
Mhm.
Why is this belief such a powerful catalyst? It's because, and the material really highlights this, when you truly believe, when you have that unwavering, I'm positive I can conviction, it actually generates the power, the skills, and the energy you need to get things done. It's almost like the how to do it part doesn't have to be perfectly figured out beforehand. It starts to unfold naturally once you believe you can do it.
It's like that belief unlocks something in your brain.
It does.
Like suddenly you're open to new possibilities. You see solutions you wouldn't have seen before. And your sources give some amazing examples of this. Think about the English Channel Tunnel. I mean, connecting England and France through an underwater tunnel. That seemed impossible to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just about the engineering challenges, right? It was about whether the people in charge truly believed it could be done.
And when you think about creativity and coming up with new ideas, the material argues that this deep-seated belief in achieving something significant is what drives all the major breakthroughs, whether it's a groundbreaking book or a scientific discovery or a thriving business or even a social movement. That belief in success is absolutely essential.
Okay, so the power of belief is huge, but what happens when that belief starts to waver, when those doubts creep in? Your sources introduce this fascinating concept of two foremen constantly battling it out in our minds, Mr. Triumph and Mr. Defeat.
It's a great way to visualize it, right?
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is that both of these mental foremen are incredibly obedient. They respond instantly to even the smallest mental signal we send. So a positive thought, boom, Mr. Triumph jumps into action. A negative thought. Just as quickly, Mr. Defeat takes charge.
They use this perfect example of having a lousy day. Like if you wake up and immediately tell yourself it's going to be a bad day, you've basically given Mr. Defeat his marching orders.
Yeah.
And he's going to find all the evidence he can to support that belief.
Right.
The spilled coffee, the traffic jam, the not-so-friendly email from your boss, all confirmation that, yep, it's a lousy day.
And Mr. Defeat is going to be very quick to point out all the reasons why that sales pitch won't work, all the reasons why that project is doomed to fail.
Whereas Mr. Triumph would be like, hey, here's why this could actually be a great day. Here's why you can close that deal.
Right. Mr. Triumph focuses on the pathways to success.
Like two little advisors in your head.
Yeah.
Each with their own agenda.
Right.
And this is where it gets so crucial for you listening. The more you engage with either of these foremen, the stronger they become. So if you constantly feed Mr. Defeat, if you keep giving him work, he's going to expand his operation in your mind. And
Yeah.
that can lead to a dominant pattern of negative thinking. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the key takeaway here is that you'll need to become the director of your thoughts. Choose to empower Mr. Triumph and starve Mr. Defeat.
Absolutely. And that brings us to some practical strategies that your sources outline for developing a thinking big mindset. There are some concrete things you can start doing today.
First up, believe you are better than you think you are. And your sources make this really reassuring point. People who achieve great things, they're not some different species.
Right.
They're not superhuman. They're ordinary people who just happen to have a strong belief in themselves.
Right.
So don't sell yourself short. That's a huge thing for you listening. Don't limit yourself by thinking, oh, I could never do that.
And building on that self-belief, the next crucial step is to think big goals. Your sources are very clear about this. The size of your success is directly related to the size of your belief. Small goals tend to lead to small achievements, but when you think big, you open yourself up to achieving so much more. And what's interesting is they suggest that pursuing big ideas isn't necessarily more difficult than going after small ones.
Yeah.
It's just a different way of thinking.
It's a mindset shift. And they had this great quote from Ralph J. Cordner, who is the chairman of General Electric. He really emphasized the importance of personal growth. And he said, no one is going to make you grow. No one can force you to become bigger and better. It takes your own effort, your own dedication. And that's so true for any field, whether you're in business or sales or engineering or even the arts. Reaching the top requires that ongoing commitment to developing yourself.
And you can actually think of your sources themselves as a kind of training program.
That's a cool way to look at it.
Yeah, they give you the what to do, the attitudes and techniques of successful people and the how to do it, specific guidance for action. And the potential rewards, if you consistently apply these principles, are huge. Deeper respect, feeling like you're really making a difference, higher income, a better quality of life overall.
That's a pretty compelling package.
Yes, it is.
And finally, your sources make a point of encouraging you to become a student of human behavior. Just observe people. Why do some consistently succeed while others struggle? Ask yourself those questions. Why are some people more popular? Why are some so persuasive? Understanding those dynamics is a really key part of thinking big.
Absolutely. And speaking of things that can hold us back, one of the major obstacles to thinking big that your sources address head on is what they call excusitis.
Okay, excusitis. Let's break that down for our listeners. It's basically the disease of making excuses. And they describe this like predictable pattern. First you pick an alibi. Maybe it's your health. Maybe you blame your lack of education. Maybe you just say you have bad luck. And then you start using this alibi to explain away your lack of progress.
And the really insidious thing about this, and your sources get into this, is that those excuses actually become ingrained in your thinking. It's like each time you repeat that excuse, it burrows a little deeper into your subconscious. And eventually it goes from being a known falsehood to something you genuinely believe.
Wow.
You convince yourself that that excuse is the real reason you're not succeeding.
That is scary.
It is.
Like you literally start to believe your own lies.
You do. And that's why breaking free from this excuse pattern is so important. So how do you fight it? Your sources say you need to vaccinate yourself against excusitis.
I love that. A mental vaccine.
Yeah. Make a conscious decision to resist making excuses. It's a fundamental shift in your thinking.
And they tie this into Dr. Schindler's work on emotionally induced illness, EIL. He suggests that a huge number of physical ailments actually have emotional roots, which kind of blows your mind, right? Because
Yeah.
it shows this powerful connection between our thoughts and our physical well-being.
Absolutely.
And this leads to this idea, which I love, of living a live until you die life. Don't waste precious time worrying about things you can't control, especially things like, the fear of dying. Every moment spent worrying about dying is a moment you could be living.
Exactly. And speaking of thinking, another crucial aspect of thinking big is the role of intelligence. But what your sources really emphasize is that it's not about how much intelligence you have, it's about how you use it.
Right. It's not just about your IQ.
Right. They share this great story about this guy who was incredibly knowledgeable, but he had such a negative attitude that no one respected him.
So all that knowledge was basically useless.
It was. His thinking was directed in the wrong way. And they even point out that having a PhD doesn't automatically make you a big thinker.
Yeah. I've definitely met some highly educated people who are not particularly effective or successful.
Exactly. And a really good example for you is this guy, Phil F., who was a senior officer at an advertising agency. He was smart, but he didn't have the highest IQ in the company. But what he did have was an incredible ability to manage his intelligence. He was so effective in how he used his brain power that he became much more valuable than others who were, on paper, more intelligent.
That's fascinating. And your sources also mention college dropout rates, and they suggest that a lot of times it's not about a lack of intelligence or even money that causes students to leave. It's often their attitudes towards their professors, their classmates, the subjects they're studying.
Right. And they bring up Einstein, who famously said that he valued using his brain to think and solve problems more than just memorizing a bunch of facts. And then there's the classic story about Henry Ford. He was being questioned in court about his lack of formal education.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one.
And he basically said, I have a team of assistants. If I need to know a fact, I can just ask them. His point was that being able to find answers and solve problems is far more valuable than just having a lot of information stored in your head.
Okay, so how do you overcome this intelligence excusitis, this tendency to either underestimate yourself or overestimate others based on perceived intelligence?
Your sources offer 3 steps. First, make a conscious effort to never underestimate your own intelligence and to never overestimate the intelligence of others. Second, remember that it's not just about how much brain power you have, but how effectively you use it. And third, focus on actively managing your thinking in a productive way.
Great advice. And speaking of things we tend to overestimate, your sources tackle 2 other very common forms of excusitis, the excuses of being too old and too young, and the trap of wishful thinking.
Right, and they start with the too old excuse. They tell this really inspiring story about this guy Cecil, who basically decided to redefine when a person's productive life begins and ends.
So he challenged that traditional notion of, like, retirement age.
He did. And it shows how age is often a limitation we impose on ourselves. If you're healthy and still enjoying your work, why does it have to end just because you hit a certain number?
Makes you think. And then there's the too young excuse, which they counter with the example of Jerry, who got promoted to sales manager and ended up supervising people who were much older than him.
Right. And his success proves that competence matters more than birthdays.
Right.
And your sources are very clear. Age is only a handicap if you make it one.
If you believe it.
If you believe it. And finally, there's wishful thinking. They warn against just hoping for good luck or passively dreaming of success. True success comes from taking action and mastering the principles that lead to it. So instead of wishing things were different, focus on developing the qualities that will make you a winner.
Okay, so that's a great transition into another big topic your sources address, fear. They call it success enemy number 1.
It's a powerful statement.
It is, and I think it's important to acknowledge that fear is a real emotion. Telling someone to just get over it or it's all in your head doesn't really help.
No.
Most of the fears we experience are psychological. They come from worry, tension, a negatively focused imagination.
Right, and your sources emphasize that just understanding where fear comes from isn't enough. You need to take action to address it.
Yeah.
Just like a doctor wouldn't just diagnose an infection and then do nothing.
Right.
Fear can really paralyze you. It can stop you from taking opportunities, drain your energy, even contribute to physical illness. They tell this really sad story about an executive who was struggling, and his confidence was just plummeting, and everyone around him could see it.
So fear was literally affecting his performance.
Absolutely. And the advice here for you is to be proactive. Confront your fears head on. They give some great examples. If you're afraid of failing an exam, use that energy to study. If you're facing a fear that's outside your control, shift your focus of attention. To overcome the fear of criticism, make sure your actions are ethical and well considered.
So it's about taking control.
It is. They also give a 2-step process for overcoming fear. First, isolate the fear. Define what you're actually afraid of. And second, take some kind of action related to that fear.
Right.
Any action. Because hesitation just makes it worse.
Action is the antidote to fear.
Absolutely. And speaking of taking control, another key to confidence is managing your memory bank. All those thoughts and memories we carry around. They advise being very deliberate about what you deposit into that mental bank. Focus on the positive, the pleasant experiences, especially before you go to sleep.
So, like, prime your mind with positive thoughts.
Exactly. And equally important is what you withdraw from that memory bank. Actively destroy negative thoughts before they take root and grow into what they call mind monsters. It's this vivid image, right?
Yeah.
Of people creating these mental monsters from past hurts and anxieties. And by repeatedly replaying those negative experiences, you're basically feeding those monsters.
Letting them grow bigger and stronger.
Exactly. And they connect this to all kinds of self-destructive behaviors, emphasizing how serious this is. They also point to therapy as a way to help people reframe their past in a more positive light and focus on reasons to be happy.
So it's about choosing what you focus on.
It is. And another thing that can really hold us back is the fear of other people. But a lot of that fear comes from putting people on a pedestal, thinking they're somehow superior to us. So your sources really emphasize putting people into perspective. Remember that we're all human. We all have the same basic needs and emotions.
Yeah.
They share this anecdote about a guy who was in the army, and he was naturally shy. But he realized that even the officers, even the people in charge, weren't these intimidating superhumans. They were just people.
Yeah.
And there's the example of this hotel clerk who stayed calm even when a customer was yelling at him.
Oh, I can relate to that.
Right. Because not about you. It's about the other person's internal state. And they offer this great hold your fire principle. When someone's angry, let them vent. Then let it go. It's not worth holding on to.
That's such good advice.
And then there's the story of the student who cheated on a test.
Oh, yeah.
And he felt so guilty afterward because it went against his own sense of right and wrong. And that guilt really ate away at his confidence.
So doing what you know is right builds confidence.
Absolutely. And finally, your sources really emphasize that confident action leads to confident thinking. So don't wait until you feel confident to act. Act the way you want to feel.
To fake it till you make it.
In a way, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And they give 5 specific exercises. Sit in the front row, make eye contact, walk a little faster, speak up more often, and smile big.
Those are great. And it makes sense, right? When you act confident, you start to feel more confident.
Exactly. And it changes how others perceive you, too.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about how to think big. And your sources make this clear distinction between small thinking and big thinking.
Right. And they share this interesting observation from a recruiter who was interviewing college seniors. And he was really disappointed by how many of them lacked the drive to make a real difference in the world.
So it's not just about getting a job, it's about having a bigger purpose.
It is. And they provide some helpful examples of, like, negative phrases that small thinkers might use. Things like, it's no use, we're whipped.
Right.
And then they offer the big thinker's response, which would be something like, we're not whipped yet. Let's keep trying. Here's a new angle.
I love that. It's so much more empowering.
It is. And they give 4 ways you can develop big thinking. Think and speak optimistically. Use positive language when talking about others. Encourage people with genuine praise. And use positive words when outlining your plans.
So it's about framing everything in a positive light.
It is. And another key aspect of thinking big is being able to see potential.
Potential in what sense?
In everything. Seeing things not just as they are, but as they could be. They give this great example of a real estate salesman who could look at a rundown farm and see its potential.
And then convey that to potential buyers.
Exactly. He could help them see the possibilities. And then there's the story about the department store executive who was upset because a salesperson was rude to a customer who only spent a small amount.
Oh, yeah. He saw the bigger picture.
He did.
Yeah.
He understood that every customer is valuable, regardless of how much they spent.
Mm.
And then there's the student who was struggling financially, but chose to focus on his future potential instead of his current limitations.
So it's about having that long-term vision.
It is. And your sources provide a helpful table that contrasts petty thinking with big thinking in everyday situations. Things like expense accounts, conversations, how you view progress. And the point is, in each of these scenarios, you have a choice.
It's about choosing how you want to think.
Exactly. And we talked earlier about the importance of belief. And that ties into creativity and problem solving. Your sources have this thought-provoking eliminate jails experiment.
Oh, I remember that one. That was interesting.
It's about challenging traditional thinking, right? Finding creative solutions. And they make the point that if you believe you can like someone, you'll actually find reasons to like them.
That's so true. When you're looking for the good in someone, you tend to find it.
And on the flip side, disbelief can really block your creativity. They tell this story about a mail order clerk who wanted a better job. And at first he thought, oh, I could never finish college. But then he shifted his mindset and found a way.
So belief unlocks possibilities.
It does. And to cultivate this kind of creative thinking, they emphasize challenging traditional ways of doing things. They give examples of unconventional ideas and suggest that your reaction to those ideas reveals whether you're stuck in tradition paralysis or you have a more open, creative mind.
Makes sense. So how do you fight that tradition paralysis?
They give 3 ways. Be receptive to new ideas. Ask why. to understand the reasons behind traditions and experiment with new ways of doing things. Because traditional thinking can really hold you back.
It can stifle progress.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about belief, overcoming fear, challenging traditional thinking. Another important element of thinking big is this commitment to continuous improvement. They give the example of a department store manager who implemented a weekly improvement program,
Right.
focusing on customer service, employee development, merchandise promotion. He was always asking, how can we do this better?
And the key takeaway for you listening is that it's not just what you know right now. It's about your willingness to keep learning and applying that knowledge.
Yeah.
Most successful people are the ones who are always striving to improve.
Always looking for ways to do things better.
Exactly. And they highlight the General Electric slogan, progress is our most important product. Make that your motto.
I love that. And that leads into another important aspect, expanding your capacity. How much you can actually accomplish. They share this powerful story about a woman, Mrs. S., who was suddenly forced to work after her husband had an accident.
Yeah.
And she discovered that she could do so much more than she thought she could.
Which proves that capacity is often a state of mind.
It's like we limit ourselves by thinking, I'm too busy or I can't handle anymore.
Right. And they contrast that with the employee who's always willing to take on more.
Who sees it as a challenge.
Yeah. And those are the people who move ahead.
So the winning combination is to not only do what you do better, but also to do more of it.
Exactly. And they give a simple two-step process. Eagerly accept more responsibility and see it as a compliment to your abilities. Because those who are already busy are often the most capable.
So true. And thinking big also involves utilizing the ideas of others. They talk about leadership not as just giving orders, but as a process of using other people's ideas as raw material.
Right. It's about harnessing the power of collaboration.
And they make the point that you shouldn't expect ready-made solutions from others. Their ideas are sparks that can ignite your own thinking.
Exactly. And they give the example of an executive management seminar where everyone shared solutions to problems.
It's like crowdsourcing ideas.
It is. And that's why successful businesses invest so much in consumer research, to understand their customers' needs and ideas.
Yeah.
And they tell this great story about an accountant who got into real estate because of something he heard at a luncheon he attended outside of his field.
So it's about exposing yourself to new ideas and perspectives.
Exactly. And they recommend joining professional groups, both within your field and outside of it.
So it's like cross-pollinating your mind.
Yeah. And at the core of all of this is this belief in your own importance.
Self-worth.
Self-worth. Your sources state very clearly, if you think you're inferior, you'll act inferior. To become important, you have to believe you are. Your thoughts shape your actions.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. And that belief in your own importance can be reflected in your appearance and work ethic. They talk about dressing well, not to impress others, but to boost your own confidence.
To think sharp, as they say.
Yeah. And they contrast that with the negative impact of a shabby appearance.
Like you're not taking yourself seriously.
Exactly. And their advice is to invest in quality over quantity. Pay twice as much and buy half as many.
I love that. And they also talk about your attitude towards your work.
Right.
They describe this personnel audit system that differentiates between employees who see their job as important and those who just see it as a job.
Right. And the ones who see it as important, they're the ones who are enthusiastic, who go the extra mile.
Who bring that energy.
Yeah. And enthusiasm is contagious. It leads to better work. And your attitude as a leader really influences your team.
Sets the tone.
Sets the tone. And finally, you have to sell yourself on your own value. They tell this great story about a car salesman who gives himself a pep talk before making calls.
Oh, yeah.
To boost his
To
confidence.
love himself up.
Yeah. And the analogy they use is Coca-Cola. They never stop advertising, right? They're constantly reselling their product.
Yeah.
And they suggest that a lot of people are half alive because they haven't sold themselves on their own worth.
It's like they're undervaluing themselves.
Exactly. And they talk about this guy, Tom Staley, who created a 60-second commercial about himself that he recited every day.
That's such a cool idea, like a personal affirmation.
Yeah. And to help you upgrade your thinking, they provide a really practical, how am I thinking, checklist. It has questions to help you evaluate your thought patterns in different situations. Worry, new ideas, appearance, conversations, criticism.
So it's like a self-assessment tool.
It is. And then they get into the importance of your mental environment. They make this powerful point that our minds are shaped by our surroundings, just like our bodies are affected by the food we eat.
Yeah.
Our environment influences our habits, our attitudes, even our personality. Imagine how different you would be if you had been raised in a different country.
It's like nature versus nurture, right?
Yeah. And they suggest that most people are influenced to some degree by negative beliefs that are prevalent in their environment. And they categorize people into three groups: those who've surrendered to those limitations, those who fight against them but struggle, and those who create a positive environment and achieve greater
So the
success.
goal is to be in that third group.
Exactly. And you have to be careful about who you surround yourself with. They talk about negators, people who are always negative and might try to sabotage your progress.
Energy vampires.
Yeah. And they tell a story about this guy, WW, who was a classic negator, always focused on the negative.
So it's about choosing your flock wisely.
Absolutely. Especially in the workplace. Surround yourself with positive, ambitious people. And be aware that some colleagues might be jealous or try to hold you back.
Yeah, that's real.
It is. And they give 3 rules for cultivating a success environment.
Mhm.
Seek out positive thinkers as friends. Choose friends with diverse views but real potential. And choose friends who focus on positive things and encourage your success.
So it's about creating a supportive network.
It is. And on the flip side, you have to avoid what they call thought poison. Gossip, negativity, dwelling on unimportant things.
Draining your mental energy.
Exactly. They give examples of common gossip topics, and they also emphasize the costs of always trying to take shortcuts or settling for less than the best. They advocate for a go first class mentality.
Like invest in quality.
Yeah. And they give 7 rules for a good mental environment.
Mm-hmm.
Seek out positive people, avoid negative people, seek advice from successful people, get plenty of psychological sunshine, throw out thought poison, go first class in everything, and make your attitudes your allies.
That's a great list. And they talk about how our attitudes speak volumes about us. We're constantly reading other people's attitudes through their cues, and they're doing the same with us. It's
Right.
not just about the words we say, it's our tone of voice, our body language.
It's this ancient form of communication that goes way back. And they quote Professor Irwin H. Shell, who said that attitude is the linkage factor that allows our abilities to be effective and produce results.
So attitude is key.
It is. And they really highlight the power of enthusiasm. Enthusiastic people are magnetic. They draw others to them. They give examples of a salesman, a teacher, a minister.
Yeah.
And they even quantify the impact. They tell this story about the Red Cross and how donations increased by over 1,000% just because of enthusiastic leadership.
Oh, that's incredible. So how do you cultivate enthusiasm?
They recommend learning more about things you're not enthusiastic about.
To like delve deeper into it.
Yeah. They use the example of the bumblebee.
Yeah.
It seems impossible that it can fly, right?
Yeah.
But when you understand the science behind it, it's fascinating.
Makes sense.
And they give 3 ways to cultivate enthusiasm. Act enthusiastic, be the I feel great person, and transmit good news to others.
Spread the positivity.
Spread the positivity.
Okay, so another important concept they talk about is making others feel important. It's this basic human need.
It is. And despite the fact that it costs nothing, it's something we often forget to do.
Yeah.
And they get into the philosophical basis for this. They talk about how our entire culture, our legal system, our religious teachings are all based on the idea of the importance of the individual.
Right.
And they use this powerful analogy of a mountain rescue. Everyone involved, even the person who makes the coffee, is important.
Everyone plays a role.
And they give 2 reasons why everyone you encounter is important to you. First, they do more for you when they feel important. They give the example of a grumpy bus driver.
Oh, yeah.
And second, helping others feel important makes you feel important too.
It's a win-win.
It is. And they tell this story about an elevator operator who felt invisible. Nobody acknowledged him. And it really got to him.
Sad.
Yeah. And they give 3 ways to show people they're important.
Mm-hmm.
Remember and use their names correctly. Don't hog the glory, and be thoughtfully considerate.
Show that you care.
Exactly. And another way to show you care is to give more than expected.
Oh, yeah, they have this great example of a gas station in Cincinnati that went above and beyond for its customers.
Yeah.
And they created this incredible loyalty.
Yeah. And they contrast that with the assistant who just does the bare minimum.
And the salesman who goes the extra mile.
Exactly. And their advice is simple.
Oh.
Always give people more than they expect to get.
Each little extra is a money seed.
It is.
Okay.
And that leads into this crucial idea of thinking right toward people.
Which they say is the foundation of success.
It is. They state very clearly that your success depends on the support of others. And the only real hurdle is getting that support.
And this applies to everyone, right? Executives, salespeople, teachers, politicians, writers.
Everyone. They give an example.